Did you know that 90% of people who start a podcast stop or fail within the first 12 months of the initial launch of their show? The thing is, podcasting is tough work. It's more work on either side of the mic than most people ever consider. So they get started, and as soon as they start, they realize this is more than I thought it was going to be. I can't keep on going, which I've always found to be a shame, because when people start a podcast, it's typically, or they decide to guest on podcasts, either side is because they believe they have a message that's going to help the world or serve somebody, or they have a passion or purpose involved in it. So for me, it's heartbreaking to know that 90% of people don't make it even to their first year. My name's Alex Sanfilippo, and today I'm going to talk about 3 things that every podcaster should do right now. And every podcaster is not just a podcast host, but also a podcast guest. So the 3 things I'm going to dive into right now are so important if you want to be in that 10% that actually make it. So first, I'm going to get right into the big one here, and you've heard me say this before if you've ever heard me talk about podcasting. Number 1, the first thing every podcaster should do right now is develop your why. Develop your why. What is your reason for podcasting? Who does it serve? How does it serve? These are questions that we need to ask as podcast hosts. So first and foremost, what is the reason for your podcast? You need to sit down and write this on a piece of paper. Like, don't even write on your computer. Start off on a piece of paper with a pen. I don't know if you even know what that is. But if you write it out that way, you'll really get some clarity as to why you're podcasting. The next thing you want to get into is who does it serve? Who is it actually for? And I've said this many times, it can't be for everyone. It's got to be for a specific niche of people. And here's why I say that. Because so many podcasters in the 90% tell me, Alex, but my show is for everybody, because everybody needs to focus on mental health. They need to focus on improving their craft. They need to focus on their physical health, right? These are things that people say, but if your podcast is for everybody, it's for nobody, because nobody is everybody. You have to find a way to really narrow that down. So again, developing your why starts with making sure you know your reason for podcasting, and then think about who it specifically serves. The next thing is, how does it serve? So what value is it going to add to that specific person? Here's the thing. If you want to develop your why properly, you need to get an answer around each of these questions. And if you're a podcast guest, ask host, why do you do this podcast? What's the purpose behind your podcast? What's the why of your podcast? When you ask a host that and they can give you a clear, precise answer, you know that's a show worth being on. Now, if they say, "Oh man, it's kind of for everybody, and it helps most people who listen," and I think that people from the ages of 5 to 95 are listening, and right, if those start being the answers, it should be a red flag. Is, you know what, this host has not taken the time to develop their why, and people who don't develop their why are in the 90% of people that don't make it as a podcaster. If you want to be on podcasts in the top 10%. It has nothing to do with download numbers or anything like that, or listeners. It has to do with a developed why behind that podcast. So that's the number one thing that every podcaster should do right now. And guests, make sure that hosts are doing this if you're going to be on their show. Number 2, the next thing I'm going to mention is to narrow down your focus. Narrow down your focus. There's a lot of practical ways to do this. And I just mentioned the importance of having an ideal listener, right? Somebody that the show is actually for is so important. The first thing I'm going to mention is to rename your show to what it's specifically about. Now, a lot of people hate this one. They're like, well, Alex, I've been going for 6 months. I'm not going to rename my show. No, maybe you should. Why not? And here's why I say that. The Alex 2.0 show tells you nothing about what my podcast is about. Alex 2.0, what does that mean, right? Like, what is that about? But if I had a show that was really specific about one thing, and it was for that one person, if I named it something that has to do with that precisely, they would be more intrigued to listen. So again, Alex 2.0, you don't know what you're getting into. You have no idea what the show is about just by hearing that. So what you want to do is really describe it. So if I'm talking about physical health, I'm going to call it the show for 35-year-old entrepreneurs who want to be fit, right? Something that's very specific, maybe too specific, but you get the idea, right? Like, if that's what my show is about, fitness for people in their mid-30s that are entrepreneurs that don't have time to work out, if I name it something really specific, so when that person is scrolling past my show, they will stop and be like, oh, that's me. Because again, my why also tells me, the host, who my show is for, and I'm describing my show in its title by that why. I hope that all makes sense so far. That's a really important thing to do. The next thing to do is to make your episodes shorter and to rename them. Again, right? Like I'm talking about renaming a lot of things. Make them very precise. I see a lot of podcast hosts that just say a conversation with, and they put their guest name. Again, if I'm a listener, I don't know what that conversation's about. I personally don't like to listen to everyone's conversations. I want to listen to ones that pertain to me, that are interesting to me. Running with the same fitness example, if it said how Alex Sanfilippo maintains a six-pack at 35 years old when he's working a new startup, that, again, for me, it's weird that I'm using myself as an example. Sorry about that. That, for me, would be an interesting podcast episode because I'd be like, I want a six-pack and I'm working with a startup. Like, how the heck can you do both, right? I didn't know that was possible. That just became an interesting episode. Now, like I said, rename it, but also make it shorter. One of the issues, and I talked about this last season in this podcast, so make sure that you go to podpros.com/198, watch, listen, or read that episode because I really dive into this. But one of the biggest complaints about podcasting is that episodes are too long. If I can make that episode shorter and only talk to my guests about that one topic that I put in the title of the episode, that I reinforce in the description of the episode, if we only talk about that instead of 10 other things as well, then that's a much better episode that, again, is going to deliver on the promise and accurately help the person who gets to hear it. So that's a really important thing. Again, make sure that the episodes are really specific about one thing and shorten them as much as you possibly can. I don't mean to edit out every little or I mean, like those type of things, right? What I mean is just don't talk about as many topics. Keep it really narrow focused once again. Now, here's the thing for guests here. So if you're a guest, here's the pro tip I've got for you. Look at the show. By looking at the show, can you tell what it's about without listening to an episode? Can you tell what it's about without listening to an episode? So again, if you went to a podcast that was called Alex 2.0 and it said conversation with Tiffany, do you have any idea what that's about yet? No, you don't. There's no way to know what that's about. And because of that again is going to fall in the 90% of podcasts that don't make it. The 10% are very specific with what the show is and who it's for, and the episodes tell that person once again, oh yeah, I definitely want to listen to this because this is exactly what the show title tells me it's about, and that's for me. So again, if you're a guest, if you can't figure out what a podcast is about, it's probably not worth being on. So really dive into that. And again, I encourage everyone, go back to podpros.com/198 and go listen, watch, or read that episode because you'll learn a lot from that. My point on this second thing here, right? Like my big point here on number 2 here. So again, this is 3 things every podcast host should do right now. The second thing, once again, is to narrow down your focus. And what I want to share here is that you need to deliver on the promise that you're making. Make the promise clear, then deliver on it. When you do this well, you have a show that will continuously grow and do very well. And again, podcast guests, make sure that you're looking to see if this show falls within that because it's pretty easy to tell if someone's got the right kind of show. All right, moving on to my final point here. Number 3 is to create an avatar. Create an avatar. Once you've developed your why for your show, so that's number 1, and then narrow down your focus, that's number 2. Once you've done these things, the next thing you need to do is make sure that you create an avatar. And this simply means an ideal listener. This is the person that you say, this is who my podcast serves. This is something that I've always done. My avatar is a fictitious character. It's my ideal listener. His name is Adam. So I know all the things about Adam. I know that Adam is about to turn 35. He loves to work out. He's in a startup. He loves podcasting, and he wants to continue to podcast, but it's like, how the heck can I do all these things together? So my show focuses on helping Adam go further, faster in podcasting while maintaining everything else in his life. So important, right? Really important, but I know who that is, and I think that for so many of us, we've not taken the time to develop or create this avatar. I have one friend, his name's Jerry, and he took this so far that he actually had a cartoonist develop, he developed the story, so Jerry did, but he had this cartoonist make his avatar in cartoon form with his family, and he keeps it up where he podcasts. So we can always remember, I'm here for my avatar. And his avatar has a name, of course, and like he has his story right there. And why this is so important is because it makes it real. So if you're a podcast host, and you're like, I don't want to take the time to do all that, you need to, because without doing that, you have nothing to remind you of the why when you're in a real-time effort, right? Like remembering, oh yeah, here's all the reasons that I do this. Instead of doing that, you can be like, man, is this benefiting Adam right now, what I'm doing in this moment? And if the answer is no, then it means no, don't do it, right? That's what it means. But here's the thing, we can't always remember that if we don't have an avatar. So we kind of forget our why when we're in the thick of it. We forget to narrow down our focus. But when we can step back and see this picture or this story of who our avatar is, so Adam for me, whoever it is for you, you have to figure out who that person is, right? When you're looking at it, you can say, you know what? This doesn't make sense. This is not specific enough for this person because they are a specific human being that I am setting out to serve. So at the end of the day, give this person a name, make this avatar. Do not skip this because this is really going to help you a lot. So for guests now, obviously I want to continue to give out these pro tips for a guest. Ask your host who their ideal listener is. If they say, oh, they're between 20 and 35 and they live in the United States, blah, blah, blah. You want to know how many 25 to 35-year-olds that live in the United States are? Like how many there are? There's a lot of them. They didn't describe anything specific. Now, if they start off saying, you know what? It's someone who used to be really fit when they were in high school. Right when they went into college, they stopped working out. They got into a busy startup when they thought they'd be getting back into their fitness routine, and now they're realizing they still can't. They're trying to find a way to get that six-pack that they used to have in high school back while they're doing all these important business things. Here's the thing. I don't talk about fitness, but if I met a host that had that specific of an avatar, they knew that's who was listening, I would go on that show and find a way to add value because my goodness, how specific is that? And the thing is, you're like, well, Alex, that's so specific. That probably describes, I'd imagine, 5 million people. And you're never going to get all 5 million of those people. You're probably going to end up with 5,000 at some point, which is incredible for podcasting, by the way. But the thing is, you really know who you're serving. Now, if they said anyone who wants to get fit, they just described about 300 million people in the United States alone. And guess what? Now your podcast is for everybody. And if your podcast is for everybody, it's for nobody. So going back to this guest pro tip, ask who the ideal listener is. If they start sharing demographics and countries that people listen in, they don't actually know. The only way you know is if there's a specific story that's probably sitting right here that they're going to read off. And then what you do as the guest, because a lot of us, we have an idea of who we want to listen, but is that who we're actually serving? We forget. And this goes back to a point for the host and for the guest. Now, if you've created this avatar and you go back to number 2 and you look at your focus that you narrowed down to, is it really connected? Would this person really be interested in that? And if you're like, I don't know, or yes, for sure, go back to number 1 now. Number 1 is to develop your why. Does your why really connect with this person? Or are you kind of spreading it a little bit, right? And being like, kind of, I see how this would maybe work. Or is it directly connected to those things? The more in sync these 3 points are, the better you're going to do as a podcaster. And if you're a podcast guest, when you can find the shows that match this demographic, they're the ones that will be here in 12 months from now. So again, instead of looking at the 90% of shows aren't going to make it, you can find the 10% that are going to make it. Here's the thing. I want to give one final point here. When you really know this stuff well, as a podcast guest or a podcast host, you can very easily invite one person to listen to your show every day. So now I'm talking about growth here. So you're like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to be a podcaster from that 10%. I'm going to make it, but no one listens to my show. That doesn't have to be the case. And here's why I say that. If you really know who that avatar is, go find people that look like that, actual human beings that look like that, and invite one person to listen to your show every single day. Here's how you do that. Use social media. Use websites like Reddit, Quora, different places like this, like forums and stuff like that. Go on there and just join the conversation. Using that fitness example, you find that person who's saying, you guys, I wish I could figure out how to get back in shape. I'm such a busy entrepreneur. I'm changing the world, but I just don't have the time. You can message a person and be like, oh man, that was me for a long time. I feel you. I want to help you. Is there anything I can do? I could share some of my routines. Would that be helpful? Notice I didn't say link spam. Check out my podcast. Done. Didn't say that. What I said, once again, was join the conversation. If you can do that one time, every single day, keep those conversations going. You might not share a link with them for 3 days, but if every day you're starting a conversation, after 403 days, assuming that you have 0 people listening right now, so 403 days in a row, let's imagine you do this, you will be in the top 10% of all podcasts because that's how many people listen to a podcast in the first 7 days in the top 10%, 403. So I challenge you, do that. Do your best to do this for 403 days straight, inviting one person that matches that avatar directly. And what you can do for your guests, so guests, you're like, okay, what do I do? How can I help with this? Host, this is on you first. Make some sort of automatic response that your guests can use and say, hey, anytime you meet someone who's talking about these 3 things, send them this. It has a link to the podcast episode where they can check out more. I believe your message will add value to them. By doing that, you're working together to hopefully make the world a better place. And when I say the world, I mean that small place that you all can serve through that niche that you're focused in. Anyway, these are 3 things that every podcaster, guest or host, should be doing right now. I hope this was really helpful for you today. Thanks so much for listening and watching. I appreciate you.